What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 265. My name is Marshall. I am one of your limited resources. And, well, I'm actually your only limited resource this week as I'm doing the show solo. I decided no special co-host this week. That's because next week we will have our new permanent co-host back in the seat. And I thought that I would take a little time to just hang out with you one-on-one. And to go over a few things, to talk to you about some stuff that's important to me and have a little fun with it as well. And we're also going to be taking a look back. So what I want to do first, before we dive into any more main topic-y type things is, what else? A crack-a-pack. So it's just you and me. I got this pack from Chris at GP Baltimore. Thank you for this, Chris. This is, of course, a cons pack. Let's get into this bad beast. Yes, we have a lot to talk about on this show. And I think you guys are going to enjoy it. I certainly hope you do. Firehoof Cavalry is our first pick. No, not playing that one. Wetland Sandbar. That's not a first pick. Valley Dasher, also not a first pick. Sagu Archer. I like that guy more than most, but I would be pretty bummed if I first picked it. I won't lie. So let's see what else we have here. Dismal Backwater. All right. If you guys caught some of the last few shows, we talked about Gerard Fabiano and how he really liked the no red deck, and Dismal Backwater goes right into that, so maybe that's a thing you might want to consider. Bloodfire Mentor, it's always seemed reasonable to me, but just it seems like it just never quite makes the cut, or if it does, you're not that happy that it did. I still like the card though. Lens of Clarity, no. War Behemoth, no. It's another card that I think is just fine, but you're not first picking it. By the way, if you haven't noticed, I have a bit of a cold. It's New Year's, and for some reason I think I picked up a cold when I was in Las Vegas last week. So you'll have to forgive me if I get a little scratchy or a little stuffy here, but I'm fine otherwise. Scoured Barrens, it's the black-white dual land, totally fine. Great little Abzan or Mardu card there. Timely Hordemate is our first uncommon. I'm going to be honest. I'm not a huge fan of Timely Hordemate. It usually makes the cut in the decks that want it, but it does take a little bit of setup. It's got some amount of setup cost to it. It's decent as a 3/2 for 4, but not good. Trades with too many morphs and things that aren't even flipped up yet. If you get value out of it, it feels pretty insane. So I'm glad to see that the top end's there, but I'm not a huge fan of the Hordemate. I would play it, but I wouldn't be that excited to first pick it either. Another card that kind of falls into that category for me is our next uncommon. It's Merek Nightblade. Any thoughts on Nightblade? I don't know. I think it's fine. It's totally playable. The only black to outlast is really nice, and Death Touch is pretty decent, but the card's ultimately quite slow. It doesn't have Death Touch when you cast it. It's 2/3 for 4. I'm not cutting it for my black decks usually, but I'm also not trying to spend a high pick on it too often. Despise. Despise is another card that I find always seems to catch my eye and then not quite make the cut. All right, we got a rare, and we've got a foil. It is an uncommon. That's right, the White Siege Dragon himself, Venerable Lamassu. 7 mana for a 5/4 flying. Turns out that card stinks. I knew that card was bad, and I still think it's bad. And frankly, this whole pack has been a bit of a disappointment. Oh, it all changes here. Our rare. Some people think it's the best rare in the set. I think most people have it at second best, which is High Sentinels of Erishin. So, well, I got to say, as far as crack-a-packs go, that one is pretty easy. High Sentinels is the easy pick. The card is fantastic. Heck, if it was a 3/4 flying for 4 mana, I think it would be the first pick out of this pack. And the fact that it has a fairly absurd upside, for those of you that forgot, it's the one that says you can pay 3 and a white to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. That includes itself. And it gets a +1/+1 counter for each other creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. Interesting point is that it doesn't actually care where those +1/+1 counters came from, whether it's from itself or from somewhere else. As long as you have creatures that have them, it'll pump it up. The thing closes out the game. It's a great blocker. It's a great attacker, and it's easy to cast at 3 white, not even double white, like the number 1 card in the set, which is, of course, Wingmate Rock. But High Sentinels, Z Windmill Slam. Okay, so that was an easy crack-a-pack. Not really a lot to think about there, I'll be honest. But let's take a look as we move forward through the show at some of the things that I want to talk about. The first thing is no co-host this week. So the reason why I'm doing this is because, like I mentioned earlier, I've got a permanent co-host lined up. The deal is done. Everything's all set. And I'm going to be bringing him on next week as a permanent co-host, and he'll be with us for the foreseeable future. I'm very excited about this. It's been tough. I know you guys have been fantastic, and I'll be probably thanking you a bit too much over the course of the show, but I'm going to start right now by saying thanks. I really, really appreciate the support that I've gotten during the time when I didn't have a regular co-host. It's a tough time for me. Getting the show together on a regular basis can be pretty rough. It's just a consistent sort of, it's always there kind of thing. But one of the things that makes it a lot easier is you get a rhythm for it, right? It's part of my routine. It's my job. I mean, you guys have seen, the direction I've taken my career over the past few years, and you guys are the ones who have made that possible. And, part of me making that adjustment is just saying, well, look, I've got the show. I've got to do the show. I've got to prep for it, get it all ready. But my host is there, and I can talk to them during the week, get something sorted out, and then we can put on a good show. When I don't have that, it shifts a lot more of the pressure to me. And a lot more of the weight. Every week I have to think about who am I going to get? And you guys know me. I want to put out the best show I possibly can, right? I don't want to sit here and put out shows that are boring or uninteresting or have people that don't really have anything to say. I'm picky. I'm really picky. And so having no co-host every week is kind of a double-edged sword. On one hand, it meant I had to constantly be on the lookout for people, but people that I really wanted to have on the show. But on the other hand, it was sweet, right? I mean, we got to meet so many great people who came and gave their expertise and their opinions. And, getting different people every week kind of opened my eyes up to the fact that that can actually be a thing too, right? I mean, getting people on that have differing opinions from mine. I kind of act as the anchor for the show. I'm the one who, sets the tone for the show and says, this is what the show's about. And when you come on, that's what we're going to be talking about. But everybody has their own opinion. And that ends up being kind of a beautiful thing. So I thoroughly enjoyed having a bunch of guests on the show. I thought it was great, but it was also tough. And it has been a while. And so I definitely think it's time now to settle back down into a rhythm with a new co-host. And I have that. I'm not going to be announcing who that is on this show. That will happen the weekend after this show goes up. And then, of course, for the foreseeable future, that person will be on the show as well. So don't think that I have any big announcement as far as that goes. I do have a rather large announcement for me that I'm going to actually say for the end of the show, but it is something it's quite important to me and that I wanted to make sure to take a time to talk to you about. But you might be wondering, is he going to talk like this for the whole time? And the answer is no, I'm not. I don't mind doing a show solo every once in a while. It's kind of fun for me just to get a little sit down time with you guys without anybody else around and have a little heart to heart little chat. But it's also tough to carry a show on your own. I've tried it once before, when John decided to fall asleep instead of come on this first episode of the show. And it was tough. I mean, all of a sudden your throat starts hurting and you start looking around like, come on, somebody do something. And, for me, I'm a conversationalist. I like to talk with people. I like to interview people. I like to get into the minds of people and ask them, what they're thinking. And I really like to dig around and find that stuff out. And when it's just me all by myself, I don't really get a chance to kind of flex those muscles. I do get to have a conversation with you, but I can't hear you. So it makes it a little bit tough. So what I've decided to do for this episode of the show, I'm really excited about this. I think it's going to be sweet, is I wanted to take a look back as we transition into a new era for LR. I wanted to look back at the old eras of LR. I mean, I've realized it's taken me a while to sort of pick up on this, but now I'm used to it, which is I'll meet a lot of you listeners out at, like, say, a Grand Prix. I'll be there for coverage and you'll come up and say hi to me. And I love that. I love meeting listeners, like-minded people that are into value, into getting better, into process improvement, all that kind of stuff. And so I'll be chatting, and sometimes I'll ask them, I'll just say, well, when did you start listening? Who's your co-host, right? Are you a Ryan? Are you a John? Or are you a Brian? And it's really funny how it's changed over the years, because before it was just Ryan, and then it was John. And when John came on, though Ryan was still very much a looming figure for the show, he was, freshly had left, and the show was him and I. We started the show together, Ryan Spain and I, and that's who it was. And gradually over time, I started meeting people who didn't know who Ryan was. They had no idea. And now that's pretty commonplace. I'll mention it like back in the day, I used to be able to say, well, when Ryan was on the show, and I would assume that since they were a listener of the show, they would know who that was, even if maybe he wasn't, maybe they started when John was there or something. Nowadays, I can't get away with that. I have to actually explain who Ryan, I have to say, he's the one I actually started the show with. And they'll be like, oh, wasn't that John? No, it wasn't John. I had a guy for well over a year before John was here. And now it's starting to even get to the point where people don't know exactly who John was. I remember hearing you talk about John with Brian about the old roommate, but they still don't actually know who John was. And it's just hilarious to me because it's all compacted and close. But what I thought we'd do for this show is take a look back at those co-hosts. Those co-hosts were super, super important to building the show to where it's at now. A lot of their vision and their voice carries on throughout the show. And we kind of add things to what we make the show up of. I add things to it. Ryan started with the foundation, and he's the one that taught me a lot of what I know. And him and I came up a lot of this by melding what he knew about magic and my skill set from poker and kind of merging those together to make the show that we made. And then when John came on, he brought a whole nother perspective. He was a totally different person, and we melded those in. And then when Brian came on, he's such a treasure trove of information that I couldn't help but take some of the concepts and just meld those into the core fundamentals of what makes up a limited resources listener and the philosophy that we put out on the show. So what I want to do is I'm going to do something kind of interesting that I haven't done before. I'm going to go host by host. So we're going to go in order, Ryan, John, and then Brian. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to talk a little bit about them. And then I've picked a couple of the things that I thought that some of their legacy, right? Some of the things that they brought to the table that nobody else could and that nobody else did. And I'm actually going to go back in time and I'm going to replay some clips. Right. I'm going to go back from their early shows from way back in the day in LR. This show started in 2009. It's pretty old now. And we've come a long way, but I think it'll be fun to go back and listen from their mouths to hear some of the things that they brought to the show. And maybe even the first time that they did, right? The first time that people heard these new concepts and these things that these people came up with and I came up with them and we decided to bring to the world. And I'm going to go back and do that. So let's start with Ryan Spain. Quick story about Ryan, or quick backstory about Ryan. Ryan is, for those of you who don't know, he's my best friend's cousin. He's my best friend's older cousin. He's a few years older than I am. And those few years nowadays don't seem like much. He's got kids and a wife. I don't yet, but I've got a girlfriend, that's effectively a wife, for most cases. I don't have kids, but, for the most part, like, our lives are similar enough in the sense that we're both adults and all that now. But back in the day, 4 years, 5 years difference is huge, right? When you're in junior high and somebody's, and you're in 8th grade and somebody's like a senior in high school, that's a big gap. When you're a junior in high school and they're in college, huge difference. And so Ryan, for me, growing up first he was mysterious because he was away at college when I first became friends with my friend Jay. That's his cousin. And so I didn't actually meet him. He would send Jay mixtapes of music we had never heard. And Jay would always tell me about it, his awesome older cousin, Ryan. But then later on, he moved back. He was at school in Minnesota at the time. He moved back here to Seattle, where we're all from. And I got to meet him and hang out with him. And we had a really cool little thing with magic because I actually taught him how to play. Jay and I were into magic at the time. And this is a long, long time ago. And I taught him how. And he picked it up and really kind of ran with it as I transitioned away from magic a year later or something. And he kept playing in between. And then, of course, eventually he's the one that brought me back to it. And so it's kind of been a fun storyline there. And then basically, to really, really make it quick, what happened is Ryan wanted to get a job at Wizards of the Coast. We were actively looking for ways to get his name into the community. I wanted to start a podcast because I thought it would be fun. So I talked him into doing it. I said, look, I'll do everything. You just show up and talk about magic. And basically I had been having conversations with him all the time about limited as I was learning. And I thought, well, let's just have these conversations on the air and other people can learn from it too. What's the harm in that? He agreed. And we started the show. It started to take off. We had 0 listeners. Like when we started, we had none. I started a Twitter account. I had no followers, just nothing. Like we just started from ground zero. We were just complete nobodies in the world of Magic or anywhere else. And, but we had a message. We knew what we wanted at its core. And I had an idea of how to handle the show. My idea was simple. It was do what's best for the show and for the listeners, and the rest will fall into place. I've let that be my guiding principle from the very, very beginning. And I have never wavered from that. And you'll hear later about the, where we're going with the show in the future. And it's the same thing. I always put you guys first, and I put the show first, and then I let the rest take care of itself. I feel like for everything from the Kickstarter to the Patreon to sponsorships to co-hosts to subject matter to how I approach things, it all will come out in the wash if we put out a valuable, good show. And Ryan was a big, big part of that back in the day. A couple of quick stories before we get to hear from Ryan about some of the things that he added to the show's repertoire. The name of the show. Not only did he help start the show, I mean, he's half of, the original. Him and I were the original. We also kicked around a lot of different names for the show. The one that we sort of started to settle on was Alpha Beta Limited. It's kind of a pun on Alpha Beta Unlimited, but we decided to go Alpha Beta Limited, kind of ABC, but ABL. And we thought it would be kind of fun and cute to have that be the name of the show. That was sort of our front runner for a while. And then him or I don't remember, it was probably him, looked up, well, what can we find that are actual Magic cards that might work for this? And we finally came across limited resources, and we thought, oh, that's actually pretty good, because it sort of has this like triple joke going to it, right? Like A, we are your resources for limited, and B, you have limited resources when you play limited because you're working from, a small subset of cards. And then also it's a Magic card. So we thought, all right, that's it. And that's how we came to it. And once we knew we had it, we had it. And it's funny because now we just call it LR. And I don't even think about that anymore. But I mean, this show easily could have been called Alpha Beta Limited. Like that absolutely could have been it. Other things that he added to the show besides that, well, one thing that we added together, I don't remember who originally came up with it, but Crack-A-Pack. That was something that we came up with. And I'm actually going to have you listen right now to the very first Crack-A-Pack ever done on Limited Resources, and it was on episode 3.
So what we're going to do now is something that Ryan came up with, and should be fun. We're actually going to open a pack right here on the air, and what we're going to do is just kind of see where it goes. We're going to discuss we're going to pretend like this is pack one, pick one of a draft, and we're going to just see what happens. So, can everybody hear that lovely noise? All right, let's get to opening this thing.
Everybody's scratching their arms right now.
Everybody's getting itchy. Okay, so we're going to take out the token. Okay. So I'm just going to read the cards that we've gotten. If we've just covered them recently, I'm not going to say what they do because I'm going to assume that you were listening.
Yeah.
If we didn't, then we will go over them. But I'm just going to read the names of them to start with. So for the commons, we have Bold Defense, Ruinous Minotaur, Explorer Scope, Heartstabber Mosquito, Umara Raptor, Shield Mate's Blessing, Cancel, Bog Tatters, Slaughter Cry, Beast Hunt. So those are our commons. Going on to the uncommons, we have Inferno Trap. Nice. Quest for the Holy Relic. Terrible. Trap Maker's Snare. Bad. And our rare is Archmage Ascension.
Can you read the rare?
Are you sure you want me to? Okay.
Or is it pure junk?
It's junk. So it's 2 and a blue for an enchantment. At the beginning of each end step, if you drew 2 or more cards this turn, you may put a quest counter on Archmage Ascension. As long as Archmage Ascension has, any guess on this?
27 counters?
It might as well be. Remember, you have to draw 2 or more 6 times to get this thing off. And that's per turn. It's not like you can just draw like 8 cards and get it's just stupid. If you would draw a card, you may instead search your library for a card, put that card in your head, then shuffle your library. So it's great once it gets going. I mean, that's obvious. You just tutor up whatever you need, but it's so bad.
It's a Johnny constructed card. So it's fun to check the rare first, but frequently it's just junk like that one. So
yep. So we're
unpickable,
we're dismissing that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read them again, and I'm going to bring the possible picks to the front of to the table, and we're gonna actually work backwards, I think, here and just dismiss some of them. So we've got.
We're looking for cards we're happy to have in a deck.
Right, like we want to play. Okay, so we've got Heartstabber Mosquito,
Definitely.
Umara Raptor,
Mm-hmm.
and Inferno Trap.
Yeah, it pretty much comes down to those three.
Right. Okay, so we're gonna set those aside, and we're gonna dismiss these other ones just so people know why we're doing that or whatever. Bold Defense we already talked about. Ruinous Minotaur is the 1 red for a 5/2. If it deals damage to an opponent, sacrifice a land. Now, this is a pretty decent card in mono red. We've talked about this at length in episode 1, but this isn't first pick material.
Yeah, you don't take it over red removal.
Exactly.
If you're in red, you take the red removal.
Okay, there you go. Next is Explorer's Scope. Again, this is a nice utility card we just covered, but we don't know where we're at, and it's not nearly the power level we need to be to pick it first.
Mm-hmm.
Shieldmate's Blessing, which is 1 white for an instant, prevent the next 3 damage that would be dealt to target creature or player this turn, is remarkably unplayably bad.
Crap.
In fact, it's been, compared to Healing Salve, which it's strictly worse than. So that's
sometimes Wizards just prints cards to give us the finger.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, no, Aaron.
Lol.
I think Aaron mentioned it in that interview thing that you were copy pasting for me the other day.
Oh yeah.
He said he has no love for that card. So yeah, I don't either. Cancel. We just talked about it. Again, it's not a first pick. Bog Tatters. We don't even want to run this at all, let alone first pick it. Slaughter Cry is 2 and a red for an instant. Target creature gets +3/+0 and gains first strike until end of turn, it's a card that's not good. It might be a 23rd type card in like a red deck or something, but it's far from playable and it's far from first pickable. Right? Okay. Beast Hunt, we talked about that today. Garbage.
This is a crappy pack.
Yeah, it's a really bad pack. No, but it all comes around here with Quest for the Holy Relic. Wow. 1 white for an enchantment. Whenever you cast a creature spell, you may put a quest counter on Quest for the Holy Relic. Remove, that's right, 5 quest counters from Quest for the Holy Relic and sacrifice it. Search your library for an equipment card, put it onto the battlefield, and attach it to a creature you control, then shuffle your library. So in Limited, unless you have the rare grappling hook, this is so awful. I mean,
but even the rare grappling hook isn't worth that kind of
No,
effort.
it's not. It's not. It's not. Yeah, but at least you're saving 8 mana, right? I mean, can you imagine doing this with an Explorer Scope that only costs 2? So bad. So that's unplayable jank. And the last one is Trapmaker Snare. So that's 1 in a blue for an instant. Search your library for a trap card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. If you're running a few traps, like maybe 2 or 3, and you're in blue, it becomes a proxy, an extra copy of the traps, whatever. If they're really strong, fine, but it's just not good, and it's not really a pick that we want to make, right?
Yep, I think it's pretty easy, actually. This is Inferno Trap all the way.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. So Inferno Trap is 3 in a red for an instant trap. Inferno Trap deals 4 damage to target creature. That's all you really need to know. I mean, that's the good part right there. There's Gravy Trap, which is if you've been dealt damage by 2 or more creatures this turn, you may pay 1 red rather than pay Inferno Trap's mana cost.
Again, it's one of those gravy train things. It's just gravy. If that happens, great. Although you've just been hit by 2 creatures, so that's not.
Yeah,
great,
I don't like it at all. I mean, I've never used the trap. I've played this spell quite a few times, and I just think it's fantastic. I think it's. I'll go out on a limb. I'd probably take this over Burst Lightning.
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
like,
Burst Lightning is nice that it goes to the face.
Yeah, I mean, Burst Lightning is a lot more flexible, but I found in this format, 4 damage at instant speed is critical. Now, I know it's only 1 more colorless to get Burst Lightning to this, so maybe it's about even, but put it this way. I put this on par with Burst Lightning. How about that?
Yeah, I'm going to say I'm reconsidering. I would take Burst Lightning over it.
Okay, I still think I'm going to just go ahead and take this, although I wouldn't, like I said, I'm calling it about even, but 4 damage to a creature is what I really want to do with Burst Lightning most of the time anyway, and this gets that done for cheaper.
Right, but for 1 more to be able to go to the face and turn burst lightning into a lava axe or close to it is strong enough for me to
a
prefer
lava hatchet.
Yeah, lava hatchet.
Sorry.
So yeah, but removal. The first thing you're looking for is a big bomb. If you don't get something that's the huge creature or the sweeping spell that's just going to change games when it resolves, then the next thing you're looking for is removal, and this is our removal spell. And you're looking for good removal, and this is good removal.
Some things never change, I guess. Good removal is still good removal. You could hear how, we did the show different back then. That was our first attempt at a Crack-A-Pack, and we didn't really have the pattern down quite well. I just read all the cards right away. Now I make sure to read each card so that you can follow along at home a little easier in case you're not quite as familiar with the set, and especially if it's new or whatever. But yeah, that was fun. Taking a look at our very first Crack-A-Pack ever. The next thing that I wanted to show you from the Ryan era, and it carries through all eras because it's really at the core of what we think about here at Limited Resources, and it is the concept of ROTI. Of course, this is results-oriented thinking, and this is one of our early takes at it. We had talked about it in different facets on the show, but had yet to make it its own distinct topic, I think, until this point. And we had heard some stuff rumbling in the community that both Ryan and I felt like were misunderstood, and so we decided to take a little while on the show to really stamp home exactly how we felt about ROTI.
And I think a lot of people have misunderstood what being ROTI means, and I think they misunderstood it. Like, they're saying, wait, so I shouldn't pay attention to whether I win or not, or I shouldn't care about whether I win or not, and that's not what we're saying.
Yeah, and even Mr. Flores has kind of used results-oriented.
He completely misunderstood what that meant. Like
so
did not he took it to mean literal, like, so I shouldn't care about results, and
results
but
never
I do.
Matter.
Yeah, and that's not the case.
That's not what we're talking about. So we want to revisit ROTI here to make sure everybody's on the same page about exactly what we're talking about when we speak of ROTI as this negative thing that you shouldn't be doing.
And the thing is that the reason why we're doing this is because this is a very, very valuable tool to you getting better at the game of Magic, and in fact better at a lot of things in life. But it applies absolutely directly to Magic when you're analyzing your play. Right.
And so, as an example, to make it kind of crystal clear, we're going to take it out of Magic for a second, and let's say that I make an even money bet, offer this even money bet. Okay.
So you bet $50, and I bet $50,
and the winner takes the pot of $100. And we're going to use a 10-sided die.
Wesco check.
Yep, he's not here.
Okay.
So you get to choose. You either get the number 1. Or you get the numbers 2 through 10. And so you get to pick which side you want.
From the 10-sided die, I'll take 2 through 10. From the 10-sided die.
You take 2 through 10. Okay, I roll it. It's a 1.
Okay.
I win. I won the $100. And you say...
I say, crap, I shouldn't have picked 1. I obviously was wrong.
Or, yeah, you should have picked 1.
Or, sorry, I should have picked 1, I mean, yeah.
I should have picked 1. I was wrong. That is results-oriented thinking. Clearly, mathematically, it is correct to pick 2 through 10, and the fact that the 1 came up that one time you did it does not mean that the correct play in that spot was to pick number 1. The correct play in that spot is to pick 2 through 10, because what we're doing when we analyze our Magic plays or our poker plays or our life plays, we're trying to learn from them to understand what we should do next time. Okay, and so where ROTI just destroys you, results-oriented thinking just messes you up, is if you start taking those individual results and letting it cloud your understanding of the big picture of what the mathematically correct thing to do is. And so that's a very straightforward example where I think everybody can understand what we're talking about, where obviously if you're presented with that spot again and are offered an even money bet and you get to pick the number 1 or the numbers 2 through 10, you're going to pick the numbers 2 through 10 even though the last time you did it, it came up 1. And if it happens again and comes up 1 the second time you do it, assuming the dice aren't fixed here, you still aren't going to change your decision because you understand clearly the math behind it. But Magic is much trickier because...
Well, yeah, and the human brain doesn't work like that. That's
right.
What you're fighting here, is your natural instinct is to say, look, this didn't work. so I must be doing it wrong, right? Like you said, let's say you roll the one again in a row, and when that happens again, your brain starts to tell you right now, this is not working. What I'm doing isn't working, so I need to change it because the results aren't the result that I wanted. So let's say I go, okay, let's do it again, and I'm going to take 2 through 10 because I think that's correct. And you roll a 1 for the 3rd time in a row, right? This is unlikely, but let's say it happens. At this point, my brain is doing everything it can to say, you need to do something else.
This is not working. And a reverse rot can happen as well. If you decide, I'm feeling lucky, I'm going to pick 1. And 1 comes up. Yes! That was the correct decision.
Exactly. You can reinforce bad decisions, which is actually more dangerous, but equally, they both apply to being results-oriented because, again, it's not necessarily conscious. You have to be aware of what your brain is telling you to do, and your brain will tell you to do things based on the result. And you have to be aware of the fact that still doesn't mean that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the right thing to do.
And it gets really, really tricky in Magic where you have all these factors, and you're, breaking down. You have imperfect information, and there's all these details that you can come up with. I mean, I played in a game in the Coalition League today against Bliven, who's a longtime listener and occasional pure MTGO writer and member of the clan, who was in a really tough spot where I had Unforge in my hand, which is this red. It's a red instant spell that basically says destroy target equipment, and if it's equipped to something, deal 2 damage to the creature it's equipped to. And the bottom line is, he was in a spot where if he equips this equipment to his 2 toughness guy, then I can use Unforged to take out one of his attackers because it's an instant and win on the backswing. But he didn't need the extra 2 power the equipment gave. Like, basically, if he didn't equip and just attacked in, I would have lost.
Okay.
But because he equipped his 2 toughness guy, I was able to use the Unforge as creature removal, staying alive and allowing me to backswing on the following attack for the win. And so afterwards we were chatting, and I was saying, well, that was a tough spot, but you didn't really get any benefit from equipping it. So if you had not equipped it, he would have won the game in the match. This was game 3, but then he points out, well, I'm not familiar with the old set. I wasn't sure if there was any flash creatures, because if you had a flash creature, then and I didn't equip, then because it was on a life gain or something. So anyway,
then
the point is
you could eat his guy, and
I could eat a guy, and he needed to gain. But if he equips it to this lifelink guy, then even if I have a flash creature, he will gain enough life that he wouldn't lose on the backswing.
I see.
Okay, and that's what he was thinking about. And so anyway, I just bring it up to point out how we try to assess these situations of what was the right thing to do there, and it's very hard not to just go with the information that's in front of you. So obviously I'm sitting there on Unforge going, please, please, please equip, and he does so, and it lets me win the game, and I'm thinking, he made a mistake, he did this useless, unnecessary equip that allowed me to steal the game from him. And that was my mentality about it until he pointed out, but if you have a flash creature instead, then that was a necessary play. And so then really the trickiness of assessing what you should have done in a given spot starts to become a mathematical question. In poker we call it a range. The thing with poker, you hear a lot of people say, "Oh, I put him on 10s. I was sure he had pocket 10s." Normally that's baloney. Like, you can't. The times that people actually can put somebody on one specific hand and no other is usually
it's only when you play with the same people all the time that you can start to get to that level.
You can maybe do that sometimes, but for the most part what you're trying to do in poker is put people on a range and say, well, he could have 10s, jacks, queens, but he would have played kings or aces differently. You can start to eliminate hands, and then you can start to make a mathematical decision. Well, if 10% of the time he has 10s, 40% of the time he has queens, and 50% of the time he has jacks, then the correct play in this spot is to do this. You know?
Right, and the thing is that we actually use computer tools to do this, not while we're doing it, but after the fact. So there's like a large portion of my poker career where I was learning how to use these ranges, and what I would do is put them into the computer after the fact, like I just remember in my head or take notes about hands, and you start to get a feel for situations because you start to see trends that pop up. But in Magic, it's not quite as simple. You have to do it a little bit more by feel in your head about kind of like, well, what are the chances this guy really has, like, Bliven could have said, what are the chances this guy really has a flash creature right now, right? Like he didn't know.
You can do.
I mean,
he didn't know, but you could, he had enough time on the clock. And here's the thing, like you could have the thing, especially if you're playing on a Magic Online, where you have an encyclopedia of all Magic cards, either at your internet fingertips or right there in the app. I even did this after he brought up the flash creatures. Like, oh, that's a good point. And I went and I filtered. The original Mirrodin block by creatures, and then typed in flash to see how many flash creatures there were, and there's exactly one. And you know what? I realized it was in my deck. And this was at the end. This was at the end of Game 3, and we were down to like 7 cards each. And
Sick.
I could have absolutely had that card, and I don't think he didn't. It wasn't that he looked it up and knew about it, but the point is, it does kind of in that spot. So if we're talking about avoiding results-oriented thinking, Bliven can't come away from that thinking I made a mistake. But he can look and say, okay, there's exactly one card that punishes me for equipping this, and there's exactly one card that that punishes me for not equipping this. And he could have either one. Mm-hmm. And so at that point, it becomes kind of a coin toss, right? Of like, well, in either if he zigs and I zag, I lose the game no matter what. But it's basically a toss up. Of which one, to play around.
Yeah, you just have to use your logical brain at that point.
Right. Whereas at that point, if you do a search and turns out there's 3 flash cards in the colors that I was playing, 3 flash creatures and only 1, then it becomes clearly the odds-on play to equip the equipment. Right.
Yeah.
So that's really the analytical approach you're taking to play decisions in poker, especially where it's a lot more statistically easy to just say there's this many outs left in the deck. Poker works itself out very, very statistically in a straightforward way. But in Magic, you have to do that kind of almost research stuff. But you can still make that kind of application. And so when we talk about not being roddy, it means not taking a look at what happened to Bliven against me in that game and deciding what he should have done based on the result, but deciding what he should have done based on the range of results that could have happened.
The reasonable range of
likely results. And so that's where results-oriented thinking is what we're trying to ward against. And but a lot of people end up taking it like, I think in the Flores example, he was basically saying, well, if I take a new deck into the 2-man queues on Magic Online and win 19 straight matches, that's a lot of result. Like, how am I not supposed to care about those results? Those results say something, and that's completely different from what we're talking about, basically.
That is absolutely different.
Yeah. And the other way that results-oriented thinking can be bad, and the way we're talking about is taking, whether it's that one spot, you're talking about one play or one result, and whether it made the play you made in that spot correct or incorrect. You can also apply the more dangerous is like coming up to a more broad conclusion about an entire environment or about a play in general off of only a very limited information, where you need a statistically relevant sample size of results before you start drawing huge conclusions.
Yeah.
And that's just natural. We're all just, again, that goes back to the whole blind men and the elephant analogy, where we're slowly trying to get a picture of a Magic environment. Every time the environment shifts, we're trying to relearn the elephant, and it's completely relevant that you're feeling the tail at this moment, because you are getting information about the tail, but you just can't let it blind you to the fact that there's this whole rest of the beast that you really need to feel out before you start drawing conclusions about what the beast is, because all you've touched is the tail.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to close off with the Roddy stuff too is how do you combat this, right? And one of the methods that Ryan and I have used for a while, we call it DNR, which is decisions not results. So what you're trying to do is shift the focus of your brain attention to the decision at hand. So like the analysis that Ryan just gave about that play that he played in the Coalition League, focus on the decision. What are the factors? What am I deciding between? Why would I do one and not the other? These are the questions you need to be answering. And when you come up with a decision that you feel is best based on the criteria that you think apply, that's what you stick with. That was your decision for those reasons. If the result doesn't pan out for you, that's not the relevant point. The point is that you were working towards the best decision that you could make at the Magic table at that time, and that's the key. I mean, the guy that makes the most good decisions is going to win far more than the person who doesn't. The problem is, and this is one other thing I wanted to say that applies to both Magic and poker, and it's an absolutely critical part of both game, and it's variance. This is something that you just have to get through your head. The day I realized this in poker was a big day for me. It was a long time ago, but this is the thing. You can play perfect and still lose. You have to remember that. You can absolutely make every decision the best to your personal ability, and you can still just lose.
Yes.
And that's a really hard thing for people to say, because they're used to like sports or something else, work or whatever, where like if I put in more effort, if I do it better, then I'm going to be better. But in Magic, there are times when you're going to lose the game regardless of what you do, but you still need to strive to make the best decisions, because decisions not results, nuts and bolts type of, approach dictates that you're going to be gaining incremental edges over incremental edges over incremental edges over your opponents, and eventually it all comes out in the wash. The good poker players make the most money, and the good Magic players win the most games. So, that's the mentality you really need to have when you're sitting down to play Magic, or even when you're not playing Magic, when you're just thinking about what you were doing when you were playing Magic.
Huh, that's pretty interesting. You can definitely hear that was not the first time we talked about it, but one of our early stands about Roddy and what we stood for on the show. That was one of the core tenets of the show. It was one of the things that Ryan and I really came up with together, combining, again, my expertise from poker and his from Magic, and really coming up with something that was solid. And this is what we stand for, unlimited resources. And I thought that was really sweet. And it still is, by the way. That is absolutely still the case. We still do shows about it, and I still preach the benefits of results-oriented thinking and avoiding it. This next topic, though, that we have is similar. It's along the same lines in the sense that it is a very important piece of how we do things here on LR, and it's called the vanilla test. And this is going to be, you're going to hear Ryan explaining the vanilla test again on an early episode of LR. I do have a story from Ryan about where the vanilla test came from originally from him. And it was actually at an old job of his. It was called Surreal Software at the time. He was working on a game at a game company. They were working on a video game, and a coworker and friend of his and a friend of mine as well, Dave Webb. He's also a listener to the show. He was building, and this was back in Lorwyn and Morningtide. He was building a sealed pool, and he had a Lowland Oath. You might have to look that one up, but he had it in the sideboard of his red deck. And Ryan said, "Well, why aren't you playing the Lowland Oath? That card's decent." And Dave at the time explained that he didn't have any goblins in his deck. So he wasn't interested in playing the Lowland Oath because, well, that's a goblin synergy thing. So why would I play that? And at that very moment, the vanilla test was born. And Ryan has pushed it hard since then. And I did a video on it at the Pro Tour, and we've talked about it endlessly on the show. I write about it in the column. It is just one of the most effective, easy ways to help get somebody moving in the right direction as far as card evaluation goes. And why don't we listen to Ryan explain it on an early episode of LR.
So what about the vanilla test?
Oh yeah, so this is another thing we bring up on the show a lot. Most of our longtime listeners know what we're getting at, but the one of the ways I see a lot of newer players or new limited players misevaluating cards because they go straight to the rules text, and often you'll get some kind of blah rules text and some ability that's really narrow or not that useful. And that can cause people to dismiss cards out of hand without actually considering just the baseline power and toughness and casting cost. And so a vanilla creature in Magic is a creature that has no rules text. That just has a casting cost and a power toughness. And so we call it the vanilla test because you should start by looking at a card in terms of its baseline, what you think of its power to toughness and casting cost, and whether you think that's a good value. And by starting there, you can then move to the ability, knowing how good the ability has to be or how bad the drawback has to be to change your basic opinion of the card. So if I say, there's a new card in this new set. It is a 4/4 green creature for 4 and a green.
Okay.
And we're like, okay, that, we get Stone Golem now, right? A 4/4 for 5 really needs something. I would play a vanilla 4/4 for 5 in green if I had to. I would hope that I would get a little something better out of that. I mean, you look at like Spineworm in M11, and 5/4 seems like really what you'd expect out of vanilla. So basically, at that point, you're saying, well, okay, they're taking away, since Spineworm exists, they're taking away a point of power. What am I getting for that? And then you can look at the ability with a more clear, like, okay, it needs to be something reasonable for me to be excited about this card. Or a great one for in Zendikar when we were early in the show looking at it. It was the what's the Minotaur 5/2 for 3.
Oh yeah, I forgot the name, but I know which one.
Yeah, so you have this 1 red for a 5/2 creature, and that's obviously way above the curve, and so you're wondering on the flip side, what is the drawback here? There's got to be some kind of drawback, and I'm expecting it to be a pretty big one. If it's only a small drawback, this is a very good card, but and then you look and the drawback is when it damages a player, you have to sacrifice a land. Well,
yeah, ruinous
Minotaur. So that's obviously a pretty big drawback. But then even in those cases, you can even say, well, worst case scenario, to flip side the best case scenario, you have a 5/2 wall. You have a 5/2 defender who's not going to attack, and
should trade with almost everything.
Right, and that can be surprisingly relevant. Another one along those lines was in M11 with the Bloodshot Goblin, or again, bad with the names, but a 2/2 Goblin for a single red, but it can't attack unless your opponent has been dealt damage this turn.
Yeah,
so
awful.
So it's awful, but at the same time, it's a 2/2 for 1 red. If you are a little bit of a slower red deck and you're suddenly facing white bear deck, or some black deck that has a bunch of high power, low toughness guys, it's totally reasonable to bring that in just because it gets down and gives you a little time to set up.
Yeah, for 1 mana.
For 1 mana, right?
Yeah.
So those are the kind of ways you have to. You can see, again, it's all the whole package there of doing a vanilla test, realizing that, oh my god, it's a 2/2 for a single red at common. This is going to have a drawback. Seeing what the drawback is, but also then again asking yourself, when could this be good? Because you make these sweeping card evaluations, sweeping generalizations about a card, and we can certainly look at that and say that's bad, right?
Yeah.
But then we tend to categorize things in Magic because there's so much information and so many things to keep track of that the easiest thing to do with cards like that is say unplayable and then file it away and never think about it again. And I do that. They're like I'll go back to an old set. This happens like when I'll draft some Nix-Tix set, and I'll realize that somebody's playing a card across the way that I don't I don't recognize, and it's like I know it has to be terrible because if I don't even know what it says, and I played the heck out of this format when it was around, it just means it's one of those cards that I filed away as unplayable early on and never looked at it again. But there's danger in that. It's useful to shortcut yourself in those ways so that you can quickly evaluate a sealed pool or whatever, but just don't let it take you to the point where you're not considering where actually this is a spot where you can bring this in, and it does a very narrow but important job for this particular matchup or whatever.
Yeah.
And so that's the vanilla test aspect.
And there it is. You can see the old vanilla test. It's one of the cores to our show. It's really one of the most useful tools. And while that wasn't the first time Ryan explained it on the show, that was one of the better ones, I thought. And you can see how good he was at taking that teaching role and really getting that information across. It's no wonder that R&D snatched him up at the first chance that they could. I've got a couple of other topics from Ryan. I think I have the most from him, as him and I together built the foundation of what we thought the show should be, but most of the concepts ultimately came from him and then were kind of filtered through me to translate them to what we wanted to do for the podcast. But he taught me these things, and I wanted to bring these things to the world, and I put my own twist and my own opinion on them, but they ultimately mostly originated with Ryan. And so I've got a couple of more lined up here. The first one is one that you should know well if you listen to the show. It's BCSM, best case scenario mentality.
BCSM is best case scenario mentality. You're looking at a card, and immediately your mind goes to all the ways in which this card could be awesome, because you want Magic cards to be awesome. You want to look at a card and love it. You want to see the best in this card that's in front of you because you want to play it. And in Limited in particular, it's a very, very dangerous mentality because you can end up seeing something work once or visualizing how it could be effective, and because you can come up with scenarios where it would be effective, you play it or even deem it good. Like this is a great card because of this, and this, and you rattle off when this card is going to be great. But it's a really bad, I see it all the time. We were going to talk about sealed deck versus draft today, but frankly, all the signs of the universe have been telling us, no, we need to talk about this. I've been seeing it in the chat zones on Magic Online. Marshall's gotten into IMs with friends who are clearly afflicted with the disease, and it's just coming up in many different places.
Yeah, I see it down at the shop all the time, and it's one of these things where you can't tell a person has it just by looking at them. I mean, sometimes you can't even tell they have it just by playing against them because they seem like competent, good players that understand it, and then they go Hedron Crab turn 1, and that's the last thing of any type of milling that you see in the whole deck, and you go, dude, why are you even playing that? And they say, well, I might be able to mill you out. I saw one guy mill somebody out once just off of a Hedron Crab.
Or worse, it might mill your bomb.
Yeah, that one tilts me more than anything. Man, I get angry when I hear that. Well, what if I mill your bomb away? Or what if I mill your only land that you needed away? So, Ryan, can you please
I'll do my best.
Make it clear so that, because me and you have talked about this ad nauseum because it's a pet peeve of ours. But this is just one symptom of BCSM, is the Singleton Mill card. And
right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, the first, the mill your bomb thing specifically, randomly milling your opponent's deck is going to put random cards in the graveyard. And yes, the bomb might be there, but if you mill 5 of my cards and you get my best card, goody for you, but you may mill 5 cards and get me 5 cards closer to my bomb. The point is, it's random. There's no ability to predict what's going to happen. It may help, it may hurt, and it's as relevant as shuffling your opponent's deck. So just because you're shuffling by putting things in the graveyard doesn't make it any different, unless there's graveyard recursion stuff. But assuming no graveyard shenanigans, milling is no different than shuffling, unless it actually wins the game. Milling does nothing to the outcome of a game unless it wins you a game in which you would have lost had you not won by milling. And that's really pretty rare, even with a headwind crab. Yes, you can get it turn one, and sometimes it's going to go the distance on the mill, but it's this narrow thing that might happen, and then it happens once, and suddenly you get people who just will latch onto that card forever and be like, no, it can win games. Well, yes, it can. You're absolutely right. You can, and you've seen it, but you're not taking into account the times where it doesn't. And so with cards, when you're assessing cards, you have to think of not just the good sides, not just even the bad sides, but the range of what this card is going to do. What in an abstract, what percent of the time is this going to be great? What percent of the time is this going to be worthless? What percent of this time is this card going to be so-so? And that's not necessarily easy to just you can rattle that off for any card. No, you can't. But you got to at least make an effort to see all sides of a card and be able to say, yes, was it Tangle Snap? Tangle. Look it up.
Looking it up.
So anyway, the fog, it's basically the fog variant in this set, and that's classically one. Yes, Tangle Sap. Tangle Sap, instant 1G. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn by creatures without trample. And the people afflicted with BCSM look at that card and say, oh my god, this is an aggressive format, you're constantly racing, and if I'm green, and even if I don't have trample, but god, if I'm green with some trampling creatures, this card is going to win me the game. I'm going to get in a race, and I'm going to be attacked. They're going to not see it coming. Their blockers without trample are going to die. My guys with trample are still going to do their damage, or I'm just going to prevent their damage for their whole team on their attack and win this race. And it happens once, and you get people who start to think that Tangle Sap is this. I literally saw people, asking the question, is Tangle Sap a bomb? It's kind of bomby,
right?
Because they had just gotten out of a game where it was the difference between a win and a loss, and you see the difference. This one card is the difference between a win or a loss in one game, and suddenly, well, that must make it a bomb. But you got to say, well, what happens when I'm not in a race? Even just because you have an aggressive deck doesn't mean you're going to be racing every time, and it's not necessarily going to make the difference even when you are racing.
Or what about if you're in a race and you need one extra guy, to win the race, and instead of running an Oran Reef Survivalist, you run Tangle Sap because you think, well, this is such a great card, it could save me. If you just had that 2 extra damage for a couple of turns, you would have won the race outright.
That's another classic symptom of BCSM, which is to assume that if you don't play this card, you're replacing it with a kick in the crotch. That's the alternate to playing this card. Either I'm going to play this card or get punched in the face. So obviously, Tangle Sap, you should run it. No, the alternative to Tangle Sap is a random dude. Something that's going to have more reliable impact. And again, you're kind of looking at, when I talk about the range. So let's say Tangle Sap has this range where 5% of the time it's going to have a significant impact on the outcome of a game. But then it goes off this cliff where then it's middle. It's going to have quickly scale off to no, this did nothing. It did not save my game. It staved off. Because staving off, giving yourself one extra turn. And then losing anyway is not helpful.
Yeah, that's effectively nothing.
Right, and so then take your a hill giant instead. You've got a 3/3 for 4, and if you play that instead of Tangle Sap, it's going to have this fairly straight line of value. It's always just going to be this known quantity, very even, and Tangle Sap's line of quality in that 5% and that high end is actually going to be above this hill giant, but it drops below the hill giant so quickly that the hill giant overall is going to be the better play, and that's what I mean about looking at the range of a card. Don't just look at that top end. Don't just look at come up with your dream scenarios for these cards. You have to say, yes, that can happen, but realistically, how often is that going to happen? And realistically, how often is just something else going to provide more value to my deck over over time.
Right, and one of the things to consider when you're thinking about this range of the card is when do I play this card, and when I play it, what time in the game that I play it, is it relevant? What I'm trying to say is, let's use Hedron Crab again as an example. If you play it on turn 1 and it goes unmolested for the whole game, yeah, especially if you have some landfall triggers, you might actually mill the guy out. So you think, well, maybe I'll put that in as just an alternate win condition, right? The problem is that what if you draw it in the mid part of the game, turn 5 or 6, or in the late stage of the game, turn 8 or 9? If you drop a Hedron, if you're in a tough late game situation and you rip a Hedron Crab, you are going to be crying to yourself. That's classic example of BCSM, right? Is where you view it as it's down on turn 1 every single time, no matter what, and that does not happen that way.
Right, and you even have to, even cards that are solid 1-drops, take a Llanowar Elf in M10 or whatever, that you can get BCSM about that as well, and think of it, it's always just going to be this accelerator. And Llanowar Elf plays much better in Constructed, and the reason those cards play better in Constructed is because you are playing 4 of them, and maybe you're playing 4 Birds of Paradise as well, and so you get, when you have 8 1-drop mana accelerators, you are reliably going to be getting those out on turn 1, and you can plan your deck around expecting to accelerate into 3-drop on turn 2. But in Limited, you're not going to have that reliably, and so you got to, even with 1-drops that I kind of like Llanowar Elves, you have to be realistic about, this is a terrible top deck, and so the 1-drops in particular, you can get duped into always imagining them on turn 1 when you have to realistically say to yourself, no, I'm drawing a 7-card hand out of a 40-card deck that's roughly 1 in 6 draws that I'm going to actually have it in my opener, or let's say Hedron Crab is okay in even the first 3 turns. Okay, so you're on the draw, and that's still only 25% of the time that you're getting the Singleton Crab out in a way that is going to actually threaten to mill your opponent out of the game.
Right, and then you have to factor in, if I do happen to get it out, is it even going to mill him out of the game, reliably? Like, do I have enough
it's almost like
triggers?
Really, what's most likely to happen is that you're going to draw out removal with it, which is not, that's not terrible either. If they're using a disfigure on a crab, then you can be pretty happy about that. But still, that seems to be the more likely case than actually just milling somebody out with it.
Well, then you hear, the thing is, I hear the same people talking about how fast the format is, right? So you go turn 1 Hedron Crab, your opponent goes turn 1 Step Links, you go turn 2 mill you for 3, cast something, whatever, I don't know, and then, maybe like a Welcome Turn or something, and then your opponent goes land, attack for 2, you can't block with that thing. It doesn't block, right? I mean, anything reasonable. And then they cast, let's say, the Dream Start, like a Plated Geopede or something. Now that crab is just useless to you. I mean, even if you mill him off for 15 more cards, you're going to be dead. I mean, you're not going to outrace, and one of the reasons you're not going to outrace is because you've effectively mulliganed your opening hand because you have a Hedron Crab, which is going to basically chump block 1 time.
Right. Unless that Hedron Crab wins you the game by milling, it's basically going to be a healing salve.
Yeah, it's gonna prevent 3, or even worse, whatever the new one is called, right?
Right. So I just want to drive that home again. Anytime the Singleton Crab, unless it wins you the game through milling, all it's doing is being a speed bump at some point.
Right, and
how often is it going to win you the game through milling? Because
people get really hung up, they get excited, and it's fun to mill the other guy. When you make him, especially when the other guy isn't used to, like for me, like poker and stuff, I'm used to this stuff. I'm used to the probability of the numbers, the outs, and that kind of stuff. Yeah. But when you see the other guy's face just cringe when you do mill away his bomb or the 1 splash card he wanted or something like that, you get this feeling like I'm doing something relevant and awesome, and you never account for the fact that when you drop a land and he goes island, plains off the top, and he's already got 5 or 6 of them down, and he just goes, sweet. You just hooked me up, because now my next card is much more likely to be, whatever, because you've just milled away the 3 cards. I would have gone 3 turns with no action, and you just fixed that.
Right.
So,
and again, as big poker players and people, we're totally used to variance and randomness, whatever. I'm not affected either way by that stuff. It's like it's just you're just shuffling my deck.
Yeah, I have no. Yeah, I consider it irrelevant as well. One other thing I wanted to bring up regarding BCSM is, letting one experience with the card, namely the first often, but one experience with the card, either with it or against it, influence your long-term evaluation for the card, right? Right. The first time that you use, let's use a Mark of Mutiny, which we talked about earlier as an example. Let's say you win with it. You steal the guy, you swing in, and you go, damn, this is an awesome card. You start taking it a little higher than maybe you should, and you start including it in decks more often than it really should be included, or in the wrong type of decks, that kind of thing. Because, hey, it won me a game one time, right? And you will often ignore the fact that it didn't win you a lot of games after that, and that you ended up holding it with no relevant target, or even ended up using it on your own guy just to put a counter on him and give him haste. That's not a good deal. I mean, you wouldn't play that card, right? You wouldn't play two and a red for a sorcery. Target creature you control gets a counter, +1/+1 counter and haste. Like, that's not worth playing, right? And the times that you do that, you're really taking the worst of it. I mean, you're using up your mana and a card, and you're getting very little return on it. But your brain will often tell you, hey, you won a game off of this. It's good.
Yeah, and that happens in particular also, I think, with auras. Oakenform in M10 is a good example of that.
Great example.
You, yes, an Oakenform on a 3-drop that goes unanswered is, it's going to do some damage. Or even, you play the turn 2 bear, and suddenly turn 3 it's a 5/5 and just hammering away, and that can seem great, but that's best case scenario mentality. And people who love cards like Oakenform are conveniently denying the memory of the times that it immediately got pacified. And sure, you got in one swing with it, but then bam, it's taken care of. And these are, and I bring these up because I've played Oakenform main deck. I played in the draft I'm covering and Waiting for Godot, or the sealed rather. I'm playing Goblin Warpaint, and again, that was a point of contention with some people. Like, how could I do that? But I do it with eyes wide open. That's why, because I'm looking at the whole range of the card. I know that this card has huge upside and huge downside, but I'm fully aware of its entire range, and I'm doing the best I can to make sure that the best end of that range is what's happening. And I'm not happy about it. Sometimes you got to play stuff that is has a upside downside type card because, well, you need to play a 40 card deck, so something's got to go in there. But if that's the mentality you should have about those situations, not Oakenform is awesome or Goblin Warpaint is great, because, man, when you get it down on a creature they can't deal with, it does so much extra damage. Best case scenario mentality.
Yeah, totally.
Think of the whole range of a card.
That's what really stood out to me in the early stages. I mean, that was from early in LR. That was like the 5th episode. We were like a little over a month into our podcasting careers at that point. But we knew what we wanted to say. We knew, and he knew that, look at the whole range of a card. Think bigger picture. Don't be results-oriented. Don't get too narrow on one viewpoint on a card. And that was just some of the things that Ryan brought to the table during his time with LR. He certainly, of all the co-hosts, he had the most influence of any of them. I mean, him and I laid the foundation for the show together, and he brought most of the bricks to that particular building party there. So that was Ryan. As you can see, if you were not listening during those times, you missed out. Ryan was awesome on the show, and he continues to be awesome. You'll be happy to know that Ryan's doing great. He's down at Wizards of the Coast working in R&D, and he's still doing great down there. So that was Ryan. Let's move on now to who became our next co-host after Ryan got hired in at Wizards, and that was, of course, John Loucks. What can I say about John? I think that John, I think he offered the greatest combo of hardcore knowledge. He was very much on board with limited resources way. He already thought many of these things, and a lot of them he sort of was able to clarify on the show, and we did that together. But he was also funny, and he brought this goofy fun factor to the show that kind of wasn't there with Ryan and I. And I think that John had a pretty unique combination of fun and humor, but also real hardcore knowledge. And a few of the things that happened while John was on the show, one of them was the advent of the Sunset Show. That was his invention. He brought that idea, and that's where we go back and look back at a set after it's been out for a while and kind of, well, here, I'll let you listen to part of the Innistrad Sunset Show, which was actually the first one that we did. You can get an idea for what it's like.
All right, Marshall. So I've got some categories here we're going to run down, kind of like an awardsy show for the best and the worst and the greatest and all that stuff.
Yay, main topic time.
Main topic time. So the first category, just, straight up limited resources. What is the best archetype to come out of Innistrad block?
This isn't even close.
Yeah, I think we're in total agreement here.
Yeah, it is green-white.
Green-white, indeed.
Because I think it was actually just still the best deck in triple Innistrad if you could get it. There was stuff that can compete with it, right? But like, as far as consistency goes, you never had to worry about having anything in your graveyard so you could cast your creatures. You didn't have to have some goofy enchantment or some four-card combo like Double Decker or the, what's it called? Burning Vengeance. Excuse me. You didn't have to have any of that crap. You were just like, dude, travel preps hit you. And it's like, when any other deck had mana issues or stumbled or was just slow, you just ran them over.
Yeah, and it didn't matter which random dirtles you had. If you had travel preparations, it made any creature like curve just into super deadly.
Yeah. All the white cards were good. Most of the green cards, I'm talking about creatures, most of the white creatures were good. Like, the worst 2-drop was like Unruly Mob, maybe?
Yeah, probably.
And that was even reasonable, at least. I never really liked it that much, but it did some stuff, and then like a couple of the cards you kind of didn't want to play, like the Purebloods, the 3/5, the Siege Mastodon guy. There's a few things like that. Even the Griffin, the Abbey Griffin ended up being like, it's kind of slow. That's a fine card, right?
Yeah.
Like 2/2 Vigilance is like pretty good with flying.
And you're the guy that has full access to Abyssinian Priest.
Yeah.
Oh man, when you're that guy, and like you can still play werewolves, and when you ever go like werewolf into Midnight Hunting, like you flip your werewolves by passing the turn and then cast a Midnight Hunting.
Yeah, that's a good one. And then of course remember the signature play for the deck, which is end step Midnight Hunting, untap, travel preps, flashback, hit you for 6. We kind of identified that one fairly early, and anytime you've ever had that happen to you, it really is sort of the big muscle flex on what that deck was actually capable of and how you just were kind of dead. I mean, you're just like, well, I can maybe bounce one of these tokens, but like, you just know you're buried at that point.
Yeah. And the deck doesn't really have reach, but it has just constant pressure where you just keep
punch.
Yeah. You just keep putting guys on the table that are hard for them to block. And so there weren't really any spells like, there weren't sweepers that you had to worry about, really, and there weren't, like, creatures that would lock you out or spells that would lock you out, so you could just keep playing dirtles and travel preparations and crush them.
Love it. Yep, I think that was the best. And then moving into the Dark Ascension version, that deck actually remained quite strong. It might even still be one of the best. Like, I think I vaguely prefer, blue-white over it or something, but still, like, give me a good green-white deck in that format, and I'll whoop up with that, too.
Yeah, what I liked about my honorable mention for the second deck, second best of the block was blue-white, which, I mean, I look at blue-white and blue-green as very similar decks where green-white has travel preparations to keep pushing through, and blue-white has silent departure to keep pushing through, and they're both the same in that it doesn't matter really what creatures you drew with those cards because they're all just going to keep attacking every turn. Yeah,
and I think one of the things about blue-white that occurs to me is that you were just saying how green-white was very consistent because all the creatures were kind of the same. It was like it didn't really matter which ones you drew as long as you could cast them and get some travel preps going and that kind of stuff you were going to beat down. But with blue-white, it's not quite the case, I don't think.
Yeah, it's not as similar.
Yeah, and what I mean is that the high end on blue-white's significantly higher. Like Drogskell Captain being introduced in Dark Ascension made that deck into something insane. right? Like if
Yeah.
you ever played like the guy that had two of them, and it's just like, geez, like one Midnight Haunting puts up, 2/3/3 hexproofs, and they've already got the other two, you're just dead. Like the power level was higher, but it was less consistent, because if you didn't draw that captain, then a lot of times you were kind of hung out to dry with just tokens, and if they had 2/2s or 3/3s, they were beating you down, and you didn't really have a lot of options. So
it was a lot more draw dependent. Like
yes,
Stormbound Geist is often really insane or kind of bad if like you're trying to block. So.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that was a good one too.
I also want to give a shout out as far as best of Innistrad for archetypes to humans, just because there were like a lot of tribes going on, but it just turned out that like I think the human synergies just ended up being the best, with mostly just Butcher's Cleaver.
Yeah.
But you've also got like the Dagger and Slayer of the Wicked or whatever. Not Slayer of the Wicked, although he was a human. What's the black guy that sacks humans?
Skurstag Flare.
Skurstag Flare. There we go. Stuff like that. I thought humans were really good.
I think high five to the human race on that one too. Like, the other tribes had their things going on, but I think humans were the best too.
Oh yeah,
and especially because they crossed over into werewolves. There were some very powerful ones.
Yeah, the werewolf human like interactions I thought were kind of the weirdest part of Innistrad. Like their creature types were kind of all over the place for a little bit there.
Yeah, I mean, you figured it out, like, right? It took a while to kind of get it sorted, and then, read your Bonds of Faith 4 times and have the guy flip over his card so you could read the other side, and, look at your Abyssinian Priest and see what you could actually tap and when and all that stuff. And I think it just added a nice little sub-layer of extra complexity that didn't blow you away, but definitely made you be a little bit more aware.
Yeah. All right, so those were the best archetypes, but what is your favorite archetype?
Ooh, what's yours? I want to know what yours is.
I'll be honest, it's the spider spawning one, the double decker.
Huh? That was your favorite?
I mean, it was the first deck I drafted at FNM when I went to an Innistrad draft at FNM, and it's the one I've had the most fun with. And when it comes together, I'm happy, and I just love making a million spiders. It's just so Loucksy.
Yeah, it's and it was genuinely good as well. Like it wasn't. It wasn't you trying to like push some boundary or show off or do some impossible thing once and lose the other 6 matches or whatever. Like when you had that deck, there was some pretty damn solid inevitability built into that deck.
Yep.
You could run a little bad and not get there, but if you had it built correctly, man, your biggest enemy was probably just the clock if you're on Magic Online, because you could set up that loop and just keep making spiders. And the fact that those spiders had reach, that meant that they just couldn't get through. Like there was just very, very, very little that they could do. They needed to have Rolling Tumbler like now, Yeah,
it was crazy how relevant 5 spiders were, but they would just shut down a board.
Yeah, or even 4.
Or even 4.
Yeah, I've seen 4 spiders shut down like a pretty impressive board, because it's just you chump one and you eat a couple of things and it's like, oops.
A 2/2 attacks into 4 spiders. You double block, but you only lose 1 spider.
Yeah. Well, spiders are not fair, but their card was fair. I think it was a well-balanced thing, and I'm just glad that it actually became a deck, and I'm glad BDM came on the show to tell us about it, and it kind of caught wildfire, and that deck was just sweet. I got it quite a few times myself and really enjoyed it, although it was not my favorite archetype.
And unfortunately, it was kind of a casualty of Dark Ascension.
A complete casualty. I got it once after Dark Ascension, and it was the best version I've ever had.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I passed the best version I've ever had in a sealed pool once, and I was really sad.
Yeah,
I think
but
you were there. I cried. And I did it anyway with the less optimal
Yes,
version.
I do remember. Then you built it anyway.
Bad.
That was bad. I told you not to. You're like, it's fine.
I know. No, you were right. It's okay.
And, of course, sunset shows are a tradition that continue to this day on LR. Sometimes we have a hard time fitting those in, but usually we will. And they're a show I always look forward to look back fondly on a format and kind of put a cap on it, kind of say goodbye and take a look. And that was something that John came up with for the show and really put his stamp down. There is, of course, another thing that John came up with for the show that has managed to endure so far. And that is the sign-off. And this is something that started very innocently. In fact, I actually dug through and I found John's first sign-off ever. And I have that for you here. So I'm going to let you listen to that. And then I'll let you listen to a few episodes later after it got a little bit more out of control. Here's the first sign-off ever on LR.
And yeah, very good. Until next week, hopefully everything draft-related goes mistake-free. And even if it doesn't, we'll see you next week.
That's the scoop. We'll draft you later.
What is wrong with you?
I just wanted to sign off, okay? You always do it, and I just want to do it for once.
I just want to do it for once, he says. Yeah. Well, that's not how it turned out. He started throwing in these random catchphrases at the end of the show, and I'm just like, whatever. It's kind of cute. It's funny. People seem to laugh at it or whatever. But John, oh, God, he took it and ran with it. He had some real famous ones, and it evolved into this thing. And, well, let's listen to this next one. This is one of his most popular ones ever, and this wasn't, I don't suppose it was that long after it was just a little catchphrase. All of a sudden, we are getting things like this.
For hanging out with us here at Limited Resources. Anya, we'll see you then.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of 5-Drop or Zombie. That's right. It's time for the only game show where contestants have to use their brains to determine whether a given card is a 5-drop or a zombie, both or neither. But first, let's meet our contestants. On the home team, we have Marshall. Where are you from, and what is your favorite 5-drop or zombie?
I'm from Seattle, and my favorite zombie is Lotleth Troll.
Or you can name a 5-drop.
No,
Too late. On the visiting team this week, we have Gabe Carlton Barnes. GCB, where are you from, and what is your favorite 5-drop or zombie?
I'm from Portland, Oregon, and my favorite zombie has got to be a Grouse Messenger.
Booyah! Great! Time for round 1, 5-drop or zombie. I'm going to alternate giving each of you a card name, and you tell me whether it's a 5-drop, a zombie, both, or neither. You also each have one lifeline this round. Once during this round, each of you can ask for the text of a card I've named. Each correct answer is worth a point. Are the rules clear?
Is this really okay? Yeah,
this is really happening.
They're clear. Okay, go.
All right, GCB. As the visiting team, you can choose whether to go first or second, but either way, you're each going to get 10 names.
I want to go first.
All right, Abomination.
Zombie.
You can also say both or neither.
It's true. It does seem like a both.
I can picture the artwork.
I'm gonna go for both.
Wrong. It's just a 5-drop. All right, Marshall. Fallen Cleric.
5-drop.
It is both. You are wrong. All right, Gabe. Lord of Tressorhorn.
5-drop.
It is a zombie. You are wrong. Marshall. Ravaging Horde.
Neither.
It is a 5-drop. All right, Gabe. Skeletal Changeling.
Oh.
Ooh.
Wait a second. I know it's a zombie, but is it a 5-drop? I'm going to go with zombie.
You are correct. Gabe's on board with a point. All right, Marshall. Rotted Hystrix.
Neither.
It is a 5-drop. Shambling Swarm to you, Gabe.
Zombie.
It is neither. All right, and remember your lifelines. You've won this round. Okay, Marshall, to you. Cairn Wanderer.
Both.
It is both.
Yeah.
On the board. Well, 2 points to Marshall. All right. GCB. Krovikan Rot.
Neither.
It is neither. You are correct.
Ooh.
All right. Marshall. Drowned.
Zombie.
It is a zombie. All right. Skitherix the Blight Dragon.
5-drop.
It is a 5-drop. All right. Reef Pirates.
I'm going to need a lifeline on this one.
All right. You need the lifeline for Reef Pirates. Give me a moment to look it up. All right. It is whenever Reef Pirates deals damage to an opponent, that player puts the top card of his or her library into his or her graveyard.
Both.
Nope, it is just a zombie. I have no idea. All right, this one's my favorite one for you, Gabe. Boris Devilboon.
So glad I saved my lifeline.
All right, you want Boris Devilboon?
Yeah.
All right. Boris Devilboon has the activated ability 2 black-red tap put a 1/1 black and red demon creature token named Minor Demon onto the battlefield.
Nice lifeline. That was way more confusing than just the name.
All right, what's your answer?
I'm gonna go with 5-drop.
It is both a 5-drop and a zombie. All right, Marshall, Phage the Untouchable.
5-drop.
It is a zombie.
Ugh.
Okay, Gabe, Necrotic Ooze.
Neither.
It is neither. A point for you. All right, Marshall, Urborg Shambler.
Zombie.
It is neither.
Ugh.
All right. Okay, Dread White.
5-drop.
It is both a 5-drop and a zombie. You lose. All right, Marshall, Volrath the Fallen.
Did I already use my my love line, my lifeline?
You did.
5-drop.
It is neither.
A panic 5-drop there.
All right, GCB, Gallow Braid.
5-drop.
Correct.
No!
And last one for Marshall, one of my favorite names, Horrible Hordes.
Hordes? Zombie.
It is neither. All right. Now it's time for round 2. That's right. It's 5-drop and zombie. I'm going to alternate between giving each of you the name of a 5-drop zombie. You give me its power and toughness. Each one of those is worth 1 point if correct.
Okay.
You each also have a lifeline this round. It's the same lifeline where you get the text of a card. Contestants, are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. Marshall is the player that's behind. You get the choice of going first or second.
I'll go first.
All right. Zombie Assassin.
3-3.
Ooh, it is a 3-2, so you get a point.
Yeah.
All right, Gabe. Coffin Puppets.
Oh, wow. I'll lifeline right away.
All right. Coffin Puppets.
I can hear you typing there, John, the
It is.
game show host.
Yep. It is a 5-drop zombie, and it has the ability sacrifice 2 lands, return Coffin Puppets from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate this ability only during your upkeep and only if you control a swamp.
I'm going to go with 3-1.
It is a 3-3, so you get 1 point. All right, Marshall, Gangrenous Goliath.
5-4.
It is a 4-4, so you get a point. Okay, Gabe, Zombie Boa.
Zombie. 4-2.
You always go 2-1.
It is a 3-3. No.
No.
All right, Nim Devourer.
Lifeline.
Ooh, this is your lifeline for Nim Devourer. All right. Nim Devourer gets +1/+0 for each artifact you control, and you can spend BB, return Nim Devourer from your graveyard to the battlefield, then sacrifice a creature. Activate this ability only during your upkeep.
3-2.
It is a 4-1. No points for you. All right, Gabe, Carrion Worm.
It's a 4-4.
Nope, it's a 6-5. No points for you. All right, Marshall, Golgari Rotworm.
Man, I wish I played that set when it first came out. 3-4.
It is a 5-4, so you get a point. All right, Gabe, Woe Bearer.
Whoa.
2-3.
2-3, 2 points to Gabe.
Oh, Gabe.
That critical hit was very good. All right, Marshall, you're behind. Phyrexian Deller. Or is that Dealer? Oh, God, what did I... Phyrexian...
Deller.
Is it that one?
Phyrexian Deli?
No, Phyrexian... What is it? I screwed up the name of the card. Now I'm trying to find it. Defiler. Yes.
What?
Phyrexian... No, that's not a... Defiler is not a 5-drop. Oh, no.
What a train wreck.
I know. Hold on. I'm finding the card. If I just search Phyrexian...
I feel like we're losing momentum.
Hold on. Sorting
Save
my
it.
converted mana cost.
Maybe you should use your lifeline.
I'm using my lifeline. It's where'd it go? Oh, there it is. Phyrexian Delver.
3-3.
It is a 3-2, so you get a point. Last card to Gabe. Noxious Ghoul.
It's a 4-1.
A what?
4-1.
Nope, it's a 3-3. No points to Gabe. Well, we had a close game, but that's it for this round and this episode of 5-Dropper Zombie. Congratulations, Gabe Carlton Barnes. You are the winner with 8 points to Marshall's 7 points.
Yay!
All right, that's the game, and we'll see you next time on 5 Drops or Zombie.
Yes, as you can see, John sort of took it and ran with it, and it ended up becoming a thing. It turns out that Brian was into sign-offs too, and he carried that torch very bravely into the night, and he came up with some great ones too. But John was the originator. He's the one that came up with the idea, and it was really spontaneous. It wasn't a planned out thing. When you could tell on that first one, he just surprised me with it. I was just, what are you doing? Like, why are you still talking? I was just like ending the show, and I just happened to have the recording going still, and he kept talking, and then he kept doing it, and next thing you know, I'm involved in these intricate game shows against our guest hosts, and he's writing scripts for me that he doesn't show me until we're actually doing the sign off. I'm like, John, what am I'm supposed to read this live? Yeah, just go with it. Okay. And, they're making me sing and do all this stuff. And, my girlfriend's sitting at home looking at me like, what are you doing? And, yeah, whatever. I like doing them. I think it's fun too, but, that was definitely something that John brought to the table. And before we move on to Brian, I've got, one other thing that John and I came up with together. And this is another one of those sort of spontaneous things that sort of evolved as the show went along. And that's Elmer, our unofficial or maybe our official mascot. I actually dug up the first time that we found Elmer and the time that we named him. So I'm going to run those back to back for you here. Elmer's first appearance on Limited Resources. It was, of course, with John.
All right. So next is Downpour, and there's this poor elk.
Oh.
And he's swimming or something, and it's one in a blue, and it's very sad. And it's an instant, and it says tap up to 3 target creatures.
How sad.
You see him?
I see him.
He's having a pretty rough go there.
Yeah. Oh, no.
Yeah,
but there's only one elk.
Don't think he makes it.
Yeah.
So that was the first time that we noticed Elmer and his plight. But just a couple of episodes later, we had our friend Steve Sadin on the podcast, and we were doing some crack-a-packs with him. And as we started our second crack-a-pack, Elmer resurfaced. All right, let's do another one.
All right, let's do it.
That was so much fun. Oh, no.
Are we all going to take the same card this time?
No, I'm just sad.
Okay.
Because there's a very sad elk in front of me right now.
Oh, what's happening to him, Marshall?
He's drowning. We talked about this on the set review. This guy is having a real rough go. All right, Downpour is our first card. Poor guy. We should name him.
We should name the elk.
Yeah.
We could name it after Steve.
It's Steve the elk. So it's
not so crazy about that.
Okay, we'll come up with another name. Maybe we'll let you name it. How about that?
Thank you.
Yes, Downpour. One in a blue for an instant. Tap up to 3 target creatures. Now, Steve, you were just saying you like to draft.
I named him Elmer.
Elmer the elk. All right.
And thus Elmer was born. We didn't even think about it like that. It was just like we thought the artwork was kind of funny and sad, and the elk was struggling against the water, and we thought, oh man. And then Steve just came up with that off the top of his head. He's just like, oh, I'll name him Elmer. We're like, okay, yeah, that's cool. And then people really caught on to it, and they started noticing Elmer in different artwork. He's getting eaten by a tarmogoyf or swept away by a wave on Sea's claim, or he's getting smashed by some monster, or ran away, or he got killed by something, or maybe he's like a majestic beast, and he grew into our mascot, and Elmer is still around, going strong. He's got his own Twitter account, and he makes his appearance pretty often in Magic sets now, and I really love it that Elmer has endured, even though he's been swept away by water, smashed, trampled, and everything in between. He's still around. So that's going to do it for John. I mean, he brought so much more to the show, but I figured we'd have to limit it in some way here. And I miss him. I'm really glad though that we're doing constructed resources, and you get a chance to get the full impact of a John Loucks, just in a slightly different format. That of course brings us to our last permanent co-host that we've had, which was Brian Wong. And, Brian was a bit of a legend on the show leading in because he was John's roommate, and he taught John a lot of what he knew about Limited, and getting Brian on, I really snapped that into clarity for me, just how much of a big influence he was on John and John's whole Magic development and game, especially with Limited. And Brian brought so much to the show. You could just tell from the get-go. I was really happy that he wanted to come on And when he came on, I'm just like, wow, like this guy just brought the heat, and he was great. He fits exactly with what we want for the show. You know, he plays a lot. He's really great at Magic, and he's ended up being a really good teacher too. You know, I don't know how much stuff like this he had done before. I mean, I know he talked to local players and stuff about Magic, and certainly it wasn't shy about his opinion with it, but it's hard getting on a show like this and accurately expressing what you want to is a difficult task. It's not as easy as it seems sometimes. And Brian was very good at it from the get-go. He just sort of jumped in. He had his idea for what he wanted for the show when he came on. He knocked it out of the park. I said, dude, you got to come back on. He agreed to come back on for a few shows. And then I eventually kind of got him, and we got him to be on the show for a really nice stretch up until relatively recently. And I just, you know, Brian's the best player we've had. He really was. You know, I think all of us are pretty good. John, myself, Ryan is probably a little rusty now that he's been in R&D forever. But, you know, before he went in, he was perfectly competent. He was playing for top 16 at a GP before he went in, and playing for top 8 sometimes at PTQs. Like, he was quite a solid player, doing well on Magic Online. And John, you know, he's played on the Pro Tour a few times. And I'm really happy with where I'm at with my Magic game. I top 8 at the last PTQ I played. I had a good run at the last GP I played. I cashed that. And I feel pretty confident that when it comes to this stuff that I can definitely put up. But Brian is the best. He is the best of us. He has the best results. He's top 80 to GP and put up really solid finishes just sort of consistently. And he really was able to translate that expertise into knowledge to you. And that's, of course, what we're trying to do here. And the interesting thing about Brian, he always brought his A game, right? I mean, he showed up and he was ready to go, and he really brought it. But the other thing about him is that he's a lot funnier than I thought he would be. You know, he picked up the sign-offs, and I didn't expect that. I kind of thought that they would go away when John left. And Brian picked them up and ran with it, and wow, I mean, he was great at them. He had some absolute classics. They're in the sign-off compilation episode, which you can find on the website. So I won't be rehashing those here, but I mean, they're all there. And I got to tell you, the guy really has a knack for those. He ended up being really, really funny. But the thing that he decided to talk about when he first came on the show, his first crack, and what he thought probably at the time would be his last time on the show, or, you know, maybe not last ever, but this was sort of his moment to shine as far as this stuff went, was he decided to talk about card evaluation. And of course, that led to the discussion of probably his biggest addition to the LR gamut, which is quadrant theory. This is something that Brian came up with, and he talked about it on his very first episode.
Why don't we start talking a little bit about some of the tools or the methods that you use to evaluate cards?
Yeah, so when a new set comes out, I look at the spoiler, and probably 90% of the cards, I just have like this, you know, initial reaction, you know, and I'm like, oh, this card's good, this card's bad, this card's a dragon, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But the other 10%, you know, I kind of look at it and I'm just drawing a blank. You know, I'm not sure about that card. So there's two main things that I think about when evaluating a card from scratch. And the first one is thinking of a card, how is this card going to help me win a game that I would otherwise lose? Which I think is really important, because you don't get bonus points for doing something cool, and you don't get bonus points for making a game closer.
Right.
Like the only thing that matters is winning or losing. That's all you fill out on the match slip.
Okay, so how do you mean gets you, like you said, it gets you closer to winning? Right.
So I think you've talked about the concept of like win more and lose less.
That's right.
Right. So an example of a lose less card that you might consider is Fog.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So like I think this is the most basic example that people have ever talked about. But you know, a first order thinking of a new player is my opponent is trying to kill me with creatures. Right. So if I use Fog, his creatures won't be able to kill me.
Yeah.
Right. But the problem with this plan is that after the Fog, your opponent draws another card. They might play another creature and they attack you again. You didn't advance your position in the game.
Right.
Yeah, and the position game is really my other core tenet that I think about. So I think a lot of people think of cards in terms of early game, mid game, and late game.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the standard way that people break them down.
Yeah, but I don't find that particularly helpful. Like, so when I look at a card, I'm like, oh, it costs 2, it's an early game card.
Right.
Or it costs 7, it's a late game card. But I don't really see how that's helping me decide if a card is good or bad.
It's kind of obvious too, right? It's like,
Right.
well, there it is. There's a number, and I know that number's big, so I know it's a late game card.
Right. So the way that I think about a game instead, which is just kind of how I feel when I'm playing the game,
Okay.
is I think of 4 states of the game, and the first one is like opening or development, and that's basically,
Okay.
Each player draws their opening hand, and they're playing things out, and you're kind of like getting a feel for the game, like how's it going, like who's the aggressor, who's on defense, like what kind of game is this going to be, you're kind of both playing out your opening hands.
Okay, and I wanted to add something to that. So, considering you know your deck and you know your hand, you don't know your opponent's, of course, at this point,
Right.
but you know yours. You also have an idea of where you want the game to go, right?
Right.
Like not just where it's going, but where do you want to push it in that direction? For example, if your hand is like, a ramp spell and a couple of big bombs or something, you're going to want to make sure that you live long enough to cast those, right?
Yeah.
Where if your hand is a bunch of combat tricks or something, you're going to be trying to push the game in a different direction.
Yeah, you're going to have a basic plan to start off with,
Mm-hmm.
but when I play Magic, I tend to, people ask me, oh, what are you going to play next turn? I'm like, well, I don't know, let's see what he does first,
Right.
I always want to know what my opponent's plan is too, because that's how I'm going to foil him.
Okay. So that's the initial building of resources stage.
Right. And that's going to happen in every game. We know that to be a fact. Right?
Okay.
The other state of the game that's very, very common is parity, and that's
Okay.
kind of when the board is kind of like stalled out, and neither board state looks like it's going to win the game. So you kind of feel like someone needs to draw something off the top to it to get them in a winning position.
Now, is this normally later in the game?
It can be. Usually it is. Usually I would consider it when both players have played out most of the spells in their hand.
I see. So they've each got 1 or 0 cards in hand, and they're drawing a card for the turn, and there's nothing really big momentum-wise going on the board.
Right, yeah. So for the most part, it's the top of the deck is going to help determine the game.
Okay.
Okay, and the other 2 states that I care about the most are when you're winning and when you're losing. And this is in terms of board state.
Okay.
So like for example, if you're you got 2 more creatures than your opponent and they can safely attack, through your opponent or whatever, like your opponent is in a very bad way.
Right.
Right? And unless something drastic happens, like you're just going to win that game.
Right.
And converse is losing, like you need help and you need it fast.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that you're considering this in the terms of a board state. You meant like in contrast to life totals, right?
Yeah. So when I think of limited, board state is going to win you 99% of your games.
Right.
Like in constructed, there's lots of ways you can win a game. Sculpting the perfect hand and then keying. Resolving a key spell,
Sure.
or maybe a combo deck. I'm going to assemble these combo pieces and then deploy them all at once, and now you're dead. Or I'm just going to lightning bolt you 7 times. Constructed games can completely ignore the board, but in limited, there's almost no strategies where you can just ignore what your opponent's doing,
Right.
and try to win the game. Like you need to get more or bigger or both creatures in play, and that's how you're going to win the game.
Okay.
And it's going to be through creature combat. And removal.
Okay. So that covers 4 sort of big picture looks at where a game's at from your perspective.
Right. So yeah, usually I'm in one of those 4 modes. So if I'm in the development mode, I'm thinking, how can I get the most stuff into play as soon as possible and potentially stifle what my opponent is trying to put in play?
Okay.
Right. And if I'm, in a winning position, I'm just thinking, how can I end this game as soon as possible?
So,
right?
And is the thinking behind that to blank as many draw steps as you can from your opponent? Or
Absolutely. And I think, that's one way a card can win you a game you would otherwise lose. Is I managed to kill you 2 turns before you draw your bomb.
I see. Okay.
Right.
Okay. So how does this affect actual card evaluation?
Okay, so when I see a new card, I think, how is it going to play in each of these 4 states of the game?
So what you're saying is, if you draw it and you're able to resolve it, in each of these states,
Right.
What is this like? Which mode does this card fall into? Or
yeah, so like we can just dive into some examples.
Yeah,
and,
just give some
show
examples.
you how it applies. So
Okay.
A card like Traitorous Instinct, 3 and a red. It's a sorcery. You gain control of target creature on the end of turn. It gets haste and +2/+0. Okay, so this card, I think it has a pretty obvious state of the game that it excels in, which is when you're winning. You need to, remove blockers, get more attackers, do damage to your opponent. This card does all of those things. Right now, so you think about the card in other states of the game. So in development, like how is this card when you cast it on time? Like how good is a turn 4 Traitorous Instinct?
It's generally bad.
Yeah. I mean, you might do that, but it's not really advancing you
That's
in
right.
the game as far as your board position.
Right.
How about a Traitorous Instinct when you're losing, when your opponent is just throttling you?
It's just miserable.
Yeah, it does almost nothing. You might do 5 damage to your opponent, but what do they care?
Yeah, they don't care. In fact, they're probably relieved that that's what you spent all your mana and your turn on.
Oh, absolutely. They're pumping the fist.
Right.
And in a parity situation, it could do some interesting things. You're more likely to be able to combo it with maybe a sacrifice effect or something like that. But for the most part, it's probably not that impactful.
No, there's times where it'll be the thing that breaks the parity, but for the most part, those effects don't.
Right. So then I try to think about cards that are going to help me in the most diverse set of situations, right? And those are the cards that I tend to value the highest.
Okay, that's interesting. Right? So you mean that? So like if you took each 4 of the sections, you would like a card that is reasonable in each of those? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So I tend to value versatile cards the highest.
Okay.
Cards that will at least do something, no matter where I draw them in the game. Whether it's my opening hand, whether it's a parity situation, a winning or situation, or a losing situation.
It's funny to listen to now. It wasn't that long ago that he came on and made that show, but it's become an absolute classic. And I think that the reason why he works so well on the show and we work so well together was because what he said is stuff that you'll hear us talk about on earlier episodes of the show, but he packaged it. He put it in this succinct concept that was easier to relate to, where we had covered all of these things. I mean, best case scenario mentality covers that whole ability of thinking about cards in terms of what do they really do. Remember Ryan talking about, the range of the card and what it actually does, as opposed to thinking about it in terms of its best or worst case, or, talking about counter spells and they're not a good top deck and, framing things. But Brian just came on and just put it in this package and just said, here's quadrant theory. This is a way to package this and teach this so that you can repeat it and make it into something that, people can really grasp onto. And I think that was something Brian was great at, was just taking these concepts and just relaying them in this ultra relatable packaged format. And I thought that was really great. One other thing that Brian brought very early on in his LR career was he talked about sideboarding.
Why don't we start off with some general philosophies on sideboarding? I mean, are you a big sideboarder? Are you only when necessary? What's your general stance?
This is one of my favorite parts of Magic. You get to express your creativity here and really really show off your spikiness by going into the tank and figuring out the extra 1% I can get from my opponent by siding in some specific card. And as spikes, that's what we're all about, right?
Especially on this show, we're nuts and bolts spikes, as they say, which are more concerned with how you approached and the things that you did within the game than the result. It's the winning is the most important thing, but even taking that one step further, realizing that sometimes winning isn't in your control, and focusing as hard as you can on the things that are in your control and getting those right, it becomes the goal at some point.
Yep. Okay,
so I agree. I'm a pretty prolific sideboarder. I sideboard often, and I have for a long time. And I try. The thing that's interesting for me is that I do come down in a different spot than a lot of people who I do respect, because sometimes I think people get too fancy with it.
Yes.
And they'll be like,
fancy play syndrome.
Yeah, fancy play syndrome, and they'll be like, haha, he has one card in his deck that does something pretty good, and this card stops that, so I'm going to bring it in, and not really thinking in a bigger picture, and right. So that's kind of a nitpick I have, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. Yeah, and then I think that one of the other things that I wanted to say about sort of the general philosophy stuff, it echoes what you did in a way, but I really like how it challenges you to reevaluate cards in like this little microcosm that is this next game.
Right. So, when you start learning a draft format here, like maybe this RGD draft that we're doing now, there's, I don't know, how many cards are there in the format?
Well, there's two big sets, so that's 500 almost.
Yeah, so
and then there's
160,
cards. So there's 600 and something.
Yeah, so your evaluation of cards and decks is based on that entire pool of cards.
Right?
But then as you play your match, and you already know what's in your pool, but you don't know what your opponent has, right?
Right.
So like as you see more of their cards, the influence that those other 500 or 600 cards has on you needs to shrink, and the influence on the ones you have seen needs to grow. And if you have a crazy game where you actually see their whole deck, you need to throw out your understanding of the format entirely and just go based on that matchup.
And that can be really tough to do.
Yes.
It's a great mental challenge to be able to just take yourself out of the normal box that you live in and say, no, the rules are different here. The environment's different here. I am not going to win unless I challenge myself to throw away the things that I know temporarily. And that's a tough thing to do.
Yeah, like in Triple Gatecrash, like we kind of figured out, 7 drops are not very good.
No.
Right? But that's just based on, you're probably going to face, there's probably 3 Boros drafters at the table, and there's probably 2 Gruul drafters at the table, and you're going to play against these guys fairly often.
Yeah.
But you are going to play against this, I don't know, white, blue, black control deck once, and if you forget what you knew about 7 drops and look at the 7 drop against their deck, it might be awesome.
Yes.
Right? So you need to not let your understanding of the format override your understanding of the matchup.
That was, of course, but a taste of some of Brian's takes on sideboarding, and he gave us so many awesome things. And there's one more that I would be remiss if I didn't mention, as this was also completely a Brian Wong invention that I did not think would catch on in any way, shape, or form. But boy, was I wrong. Brian apparently felt a little territorial about the fact that John and I had our friend Elmer, and he decided that Elmer shouldn't be alone.
This email comes from Jonathan. Hello! As someone who first started playing Magic earlier this year and loves limited formats, I've really enjoyed your podcast since I found it a couple months ago. One thing especially makes me curious. You keep talking about elk creatures as Elmer. Could you explain the joke behind Elmer sometime on an upcoming show? Well, Jonathan, thanks for writing in.
What are you doing, Brian?
Quiet, Marshall.
Oh, God.
Elmer the elk was first discovered on the card Downpour. Just a helpless elk carried away by the floodwaters. In episode number 141, Elmer is given a name by Steve Sadin. Since then, we have anxiously followed his trials and tribulations. Whether he was running from a Tarmogoyf or being sacrificed for lands, Elmer lovers suffered through his lowest lows and celebrated his not quite as low lows. From July 2012 to September 2013, Elmer the elk has functioned as the unofficial mascot of Limited Resources. But now it's time to move on. Limited Resources has decided to cut ties with Elmer in a move that we think will be mutually beneficial. We wish Elmer the best in all of the times he narrowly avoids being trampled, drowned, or devoured. We have decided to select a new mascot, one that truly embodies the Limited Resources spirit. We are not helpless leaves in the wind. We make our own luck. We fight and claw, and we have thick skin. With these ideals in mind, I present to you the new official mascot of Limited Resources. Please hold your applause to the end. I present to you Shelly the Crab. You've seen her imbued.
Who the heck is that?
You've seen her imbued with unbelievable power by the Hedrons on Zendikar, teaming up with the Simic Combine, and crowned as royalty in Urza's legacy. Enjoy Shelly as she scuttles around the multiverse.
This is not happening.
Next week, I'll explain the origins of the Marshall is Fat joke.
As you can see, I was doubtful that Shelly would become a thing, but boy, was I wrong. People now it's are you team Elmer or are you team Shelly? And she certainly made her mark as a mascot on the show as well. And I'm happy to have both of Elmer and Shelly along. But like I said, that Shelly was a Brian Wong joint. So I felt like I'd be remiss if I didn't include Shelly in our little conversation here. And so that's going to do it as far as looking back at the legacy of the co-hosts that have led up to what we're ultimately going to be transitioning into a new co-host who is hopefully going to bring his own legacy and his own things to the show. And I'm excited for that. One thing, though, that I do need to talk about, and I wanted to get that done here as opposed to when I bring on the new co-host, is that as part of the deal and part of me making the proper arrangements and the evolution of the show and that kind of thing, is the show will no longer be sponsored by Card Kingdom. And this is something I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk to you guys about because I love Card Kingdom, frankly. I think that they are an A1 top-notch, fantastic company. And it was a really, really tough decision for me to decide to leave. And I felt like it would be appropriate for me to take a few minutes to chat with you guys and explain to you what the deal was. I can't tell you everything. Some of it's a little bit, businessy, personal, behind the scenesy stuff. But for the most part, the way that I wanted to proceed with the show and the way that the things pan out, it wasn't really possible for me to stay with Card Kingdom. I want to be clear here that this is not a reflection on Card Kingdom in any way. This was simply a decision that I needed to make for the best. Again, I mentioned earlier, for your benefit and for the show's benefit, primarily. I think that the show is going to be able to flourish. We are going to have a new sponsor for the show. I'll talk about that next week. And I'm excited about that. I think it's a positive, good thing, and it's going to be great. But I have to, I really do have to sit and make sure that I let you guys know that leaving Card Kingdom was not an easy decision for me. I take these things very seriously. I only work with companies that I trust and that I think put out a great product. And you guys know how seriously I take the things that I recommend to you on the show. So that limits the places that I'm willing to work with as far as sponsorship deals and that kind of stuff goes. And Card Kingdom is absolutely one of the best. I can't thank them enough for the relationship that we've had thus far. And I certainly hope that in the future, we will continue to work with Card Kingdom. I will continue to work with Card Kingdom and work things out. I mean, they're local to me. I have a bunch of friends that work there. I wouldn't be surprised at all if I kept professional and personal ties to all of them. But I did want to thank some of the people at Card Kingdom. I wanted to thank Damon and John. They're the owners and they're the ones who really, green-lighted giving us the chance to come on. And of course, right in that same breath, I have to mention Dan. Dan from Card Kingdom, he was the original one who believed in us, who talked to us, who gave us our offer, who brought us on board to the Card Kingdom family and really gave us a shot to take the show to the next level. And Dan always believed in us and always let us have the vision that we needed to have and let us take the show where we knew that we needed to take it, and they did not interfere in any way. Whole bunch of other people at Card Kingdom as well. Jordan, Rochelle, Chris, Justin, another Chris, Maggie. There's so many people down there that I've worked with over the years and I've had such great feelings with. And again, I really do hope that I'm going to be able to keep working with them in some capacity going into the future. Like I said before, this is a weird thing for me, right? The podcast started out as a personal project and has become part of my career. I mean, I've got a whole lot of things going on, but the podcast is certainly one of the most important ones. And it's the one I personally care about the most just because it's something that I built and I built with people that I care about. And I've got such great relationships with you, the listener, and I value those very, very highly. And I'm very cautious and downright nervous, to be honest, whenever it comes to jeopardizing anything with the show. I really try to take like a conservative approach to it just because I'm very happy with where the show is at. But I think that the move and the change that I'm going to be announcing soon is what's best for the show, and it's kind of where the show needs to go to kind of fulfill its greatest, potential. But that being said, I wanted to thank Card Kingdom for giving us a chance and for being so awesome to us over the years. And I want to recommend also to you, the listener, don't forget about Card Kingdom. They're still a fantastic place to go. Again, us moving away is by no means a reflection on them in any way, shape, or form. I have probably made myself abundantly clear on that, but I really did want to make sure that we kind of put a bow on this. I thought it would be really lame if I suddenly changed around a bunch of things and didn't really give you guys an explanation. That's just not how I roll. I feel like all of us are in this together, and that includes you, the listener, and me, co-host, people that help with the show, and all that kind of stuff too. So again, wanted to take a few minutes to explain what's going on. It'll all be more clear next week after everything's announced. But for now, that is where I'll leave things. Again, thank you so much to Card Kingdom and everybody who works there for supporting Limited Resources and really letting us flourish and grow to where we are now. As far as you and I are concerned, dear listener, we've got a bright future ahead of us. I think things are going to be great. I'm really, really excited about the new co-host, and I'm really excited about all the cool directions that we can go with this. And I think that you'll agree once you see how everything is sort of planned out. It's taken a lot of planning, a lot of stuff on the back end from me, and a lot of questions and that kind of clarifications and that kind of thing. But after all the hard work and all the dust is settled, I think we're going to land in a pretty great place. And I'm excited to go there with you. So that's going to do it for this episode of LR. New co-host next week. We're going to hit the ground running. We've got exclusive previews. We're going to have a set review show for Fate Reforged, and we are just going to keep right on trucking along with Limited Resources. It's going to be just as good as it's ever been, if not better, and I can't wait to tackle 2015 and beyond with you guys. Thank you. Thank you so much for sticking with us and for being patient while I searched out a new co-host. I know that it was a long time, and I know that maybe you weren't happy with every single one I brought on, or maybe there were some you liked and some you didn't, but I really did need to make sure that I explored as many options as possible and that I waited for the right thing to come around as opposed to kind of forcing it. And I am confident that is exactly what has happened. Guys, we'll see you next week.